So we've had a few people ask us if they can make their own e-brake extensions. So I wanted to make this video and show you how we make ours. So I made my first pair of these e-brake extensions probably over 20 years ago. Just picked up some steel from the local hardware store, did a few bends and drilled some holes. Yeah, so anyway, this is your e-brake lever. This sits on your brake drum, sticks up here, and normally there's a cable here that pulls this over and actuates your emergency brakes. And if you go with a thicker leaf spring pack, or you put shims or a lift block under your springs, the top of the springs is now higher than where the cable is, so the cable has to go up and over the springs, and that causes binding and wear on the cable, and you could eventually break it off. So I'll cut in a picture here, show you what that looks like. Yeah, so to get around that issue, we make these e-brake extensions that you can put on top here, and you run a bolt through here and bolt that extension onto the e-brake lever, and then that allows you to drill a hole someplace up here high enough that you clear your springs. Here's an example of one. This is our template that we use. This has a 1 inch, 1.5, and 2 inch hole in there. So in order to make one of these, you got to get some sheet metal and bend it around a piece of steel that's about the size of your e-brake lever, and then drill a hole to line up with that hole there, and then do a little bit of bending. So you can do that all in a bench vise. You don't need any fancy tools. I have an old broken file here. That's what I used to use to make these. Start with a piece about 2 inches wide and 3 inches long. Seems to be adequate for most cases. Ideally, you want to use something like 16 gauge steel. That's what this is. I believe this is probably 22 gauge. You can use thinner steel, but you probably want to double it up. You can see how this one is actually 2 pieces of steel. I'll try to put a link in the video description where you can get that. Your tool to make it, this is just an old broken file. So the idea is you want a piece of metal about the thickness of your e-brake lever, and since it's hard to take this off your truck, you can use an old file. And then the idea is you want to start a bend in that piece of metal. You need to get a bit of a bend going, because then what you're going to do is put that in a vise like this. So you get it so it's equally started in both sides. So you have the metal stuck in the jaw. Okay, a little interruption there. The SD card filled up on my camera, so I had to empty that out and start again here. So yeah, this is how you can bend the sheet metal. It works just as well with the 16 gauge or the thinner metal. But anyway, you just want to crank that down. So you just turn on the vise handle, and the purpose of the file is just to provide a stop there. So there you have your metal bent. So this ends up being roughly 1 inch wide with the 2 inch metal, because you lose a little bit of width bending around there, but need to leave enough room for the end of the e-brake lever to fit. And so that's about 1 inch. So I just have a piece of tape wrapped around there, and then I just run my thumb up to the end there. You want to give it a little bit of squish room there, because you need a little bit of room for the metal to bend. Kind of hard working with the camera in the way, but then you want to leave a little bit of the material sticking out there, and then you just give it a good squish with the vise. That's what you want. So that way you get a compression right here at the end of the file. This piece here is about the same thickness as the e-brake lever, and then you flattened it out here because you're going to be drilling through there, so it's easier to drill through when it's squished like that. And the e-brake cable goes over the top like this, and it's got like a clevis with a pin through it. so it'll fit around this fat part, and then it pulls that way. And then usually what I like to do, it's probably not totally required, depending on how you bent the metal, it's got a bit of a curve to it. What you can do to square that up is just clamp it in the vise, leave it sticking up a little bit, and then just hammer it down a little bit, and that way you get more of a square end on it. And then basically you just want to drill a hole roughly in the middle here, a little bit towards the bent side from center, and then probably 2/3 of the way up. You don't want to go too high because you have to leave enough room for this piece has to fit in there. You can see that. This one has been squished a little bit. Okay, so the hardest part about making these is drilling the holes. So it probably is easiest with a drill press, and I have a vise here to hold the part because it's a kind of a small odd shaped part, so I like to clamp it in a pair of vise grips here to keep hold of it. You could probably do this on a block of wood, as long as you've got the vise grips. I just do both just because we make quite a few of these. You have to be a little slow because you're drilling through sheet metal. And the thing is, if you try to push too hard, you're just going to collapse that sheet metal. You want to let the drill do some work. So this is roughly a 1/4 inch drill. I like to pilot drill it first. So let me do the other one here. While you're set up, just do them all. So like I say, you want to be maybe 2/3 of the distance up from the bottom. So there's the bottom hole. Now you need to flip around. So what I need to do is open up the vise grips a little bit, because you still have to hold the metal, but you don't want to crush it. And then this one, you need to move over a little bit because you don't want to drill through that bent rib on the end or on the outside. So the holes in here are about 8 millimeter, or the pins, which is just over 5/16. So I happen to have this little stubby drill bit that I use. Just need a hole big enough to get an 8 millimeter pin. And then you just re-drill the holes. Yeah, let me drill the rest of the holes, and then I'll show you the cleanup process, which is kind of the most time-consuming part. Okay, there we've got both of these drilled. They tend to get a little bit hot, so I like to let them cool down for maybe 5-10 minutes before you go about cleaning up all the burrs. And then one thing I forgot to mention, after you cut out your sheet metal and maybe put a partial bend in it right in the middle, spray some spray paint or primer inside there, because that way you've got the inside painted, so that when you get done you paint the outside to cut down on rust, but the inside's been already painted, because once you bend it closed like that, you can't get paint in there anymore. I suppose you could dip it into a can of paint, but if you're going to just spray paint it or something like that, put a little primer or spray paint of your choice inside. Yeah, they're still a little toasty. So you want to leave your drill bit in the drill press. So you could do this with a hand drill too. Okay, we're going to try taking the burrs off in the grinder here. Get a little bit noisy. So we've got them cleaned up a little bit. You don't have to get them perfect right now. We'll go over and run them on the file now. That's the next step. Okay, so we've got my file in there, and what you want to do is take the open end here, and you're going to go down on the file because there's the metal burr inside there. So it's usually pretty tight. I mean, that'll break it loose, and then usually if you come at it from this direction, so you went down, you went in, and then I like to flip it like that. Goes down pretty easy. You're just trying to hit those burrs from all possible directions so the file teeth will cut them. You've got burrs inside the holes now. So now we've got to go back to the drill press. We'll re-drill the holes. Okay, so I ran the drill bit through the holes, so they're nice and clean again. But if you can see in there, there's still some more burr because the drill bit pushed the burr back in. So now you have to repeat the file thing again. So there we go, but now you can see the burr got pushed back in the hole. It's back and forth a few times. Okay, now they're pretty good. I've got the holes pretty well cleaned out now. Yeah, you can see that goes on pretty easy there. What I like to do is check the fit on your e-brake lever. So like I go in there and just make sure that this thing will go up far enough so that hole lines up. You want to be able to get a bolt through there. So those all go up far enough. If they don't go up far enough, what you can do is just put this on the end of the file and then tap the top and pound this down, and what it'll do is it'll open up that bent end. So if you get the hole a little too close to the top, just adjust it until it fits. So yeah, just to show you that assembled here, you just put a washer on there, and then you stick the bolt through, and then you'll put a washer and a nut on the other sides. When you pull on this thing, the bottom of the extension hits on the e-brake lever, and that's your leverage point. Is you've got this piece down here, and then the bolt is holding it from moving over farther. So that's your strength, is you're kind of prying off of the end of that lever there. And then you just attach your e-brake cable up here. So yeah, let me get these cleaned up. I just have to run them through the grinder again, get all the burrs off. So that's what I was saying, is don't bother cleaning them up perfectly smooth until you're all done, because you're going to raise some more burrs on the outside. Yeah, so this is a 5/16 by 1 bolt. You could also use M8 by 25 and put a lock nut on the end so you can just tighten it down and not have it loosen up. But yeah, that's what you need to do. So have at it, make your own. They're pretty easy to do. As always, thanks for watching.